Hello everyone, myself Madhav, Faculty of Science at Bhat and Bhat Tutorials. So in this session, I will be starting the third chapter under Sainik's entrance school examination, that is changes around us. So first we will be learning about what is the change in this chapter, what exactly is meant by change, and then we will be understanding what are the different kinds of changes, and after that we will be studying about the examples of the different kinds of changes that is happening in the surrounding. So to start with, what is a change? Every day we come across different types of changes. See, what is that first change I'm telling here? It is turning day into night, night into day, rising and setting of sun and moon, changing of climate, melting of ice, and a lot more. So these are the common changes that we actually see in the day-to-day life. These changes occur in a minute. Some changes can occur in a minute, whereas some take a longer time, and few changes are not even noticeable. So these kind of things which can be noticeable is what we actually call it as change. So a change is nothing but there is something which has changed its shape, size, or any sort of environmental changes, that we call it as change. Some change are actually noticeable and some changes are non noticeable. So there are two kinds of changes only for the understanding purpose. So please understand, change is nothing but there are turning of day into night. These are the examples that I'm giving with respect to the common changes that we actually see in the day-to-day activity. So how do we exactly define? So here is the definition for the word change. So how do we define it? Any difference in the size or shape of an object is referred to as a change. So if there is a change in the size, or if there is a change in the shape of an object, what do we call it as? We call it as change. So there must be some sort of difference in size or the shape. The same definition, I'm just writing it for one more time. So if there is a difference in size or shape, is actually referred to as what? It is referred to as changes. So basically change is of how many types? There are two types of changes. One we call it as reversible change, and the other one I'm calling it as irreversible change. So there are two kinds of changes. What is that first kind of change? It is reversible change, whereas the other one, it is called as irreversible change. So there are two types of changes. So the type, now we are starting on the types of changes. Changes around us can be grouped as those that can be reversed. If anything can be reversed, what do we call it as? We call it as reversible change. And those that cannot be reversed, those that cannot be reversed is actually called as what? Irreversible change. So here, if you can see, there is a milk, and this milk, on the action of bacteria, it will convert into cheese, and it will also form yogurt. So can I get back cheese and yogurt again to milk? No. So this is an example of irreversible change. So this is an example of irreversible change. So I hope you all got my idea. That is, there are two types of changes. One we call it as reversible change, and the other one we call it as irreversible change. So if anything can be reversed back to its original form, we call it as reversible change, and if anything cannot be reversed back, we call it as irreversible change. So here is one irreversible change that is actually given. So now I'm taking ice cubes, and this ice cubes can be converted into liquid water. So ice cubes can be converted into water, and again liquid water can be converted into ice cubes. So what kind of change it is? This kind of change we actually call it as reversible change. Why? Because I can convert ice cubes. I'm converting ice cubes into liquid water, and again liquid water is converted into ice cube. And what do we call this kind of changes as? This kind of changes we call it as reversible change. So this is with respect to the reversible change, and here the picture that they have given, it is the irreversible change. So we will go to the next slide now. The next one, we are specifically talking about the reversible change. Now I'm specifically taking reversible change as an example, and I'm gonna explain it now. So a change in which original substance can be recovered. So if a change in which the original substance can be recovered, we call it as reversible change. So I'm just gonna take one simple example here. Yes, we will take the same thing as an example. So here I'm calling it as an ice cube, and this one is acting as a original substance. The ice cube, so let me say that ice cube is the original substance. So here it is. So ice cube is the original substance. This ice cube is converted into water. So water is actually a product. It is actually a product formed after change. So here if you check, can I convert again water into ice cube? Yes, I can convert again water into ice cube. So which is the original substance? Ice cube is acting as the original substance, and it can be brought back. So that kind of change is what do we call it as? We call it as reversible change. So now if you just check here, there are some specific examples. That first one, it is folding of paper. So here there is one simple paper, and you're going to fold it into two half, and again you are going to fold it to a proper square. Again when you open that paper, you will get a rectangle form, and again when you convert this half into the full paper, you will get the original paper pack. And this kind of example is actually a reversible change. And the first example that we have studied, it is the folding of paper. And the second one, it is rolling out of chapati from a ball of dough. So there is this dough, and you are getting a part of uh, small content from that dough, and again you can get it back to its normal form. So this is an example for a reversible change. Stretching of rubber to its normal size, and melting of ice candy. So all these are the examples for the reversible change. And yes, so here it is, one more example. So there is water here. Once when the water is undergone freezing, it will form ice. So once when the water is undergoing this freezing, it will form what? It will form ice. But again, when you heat ice, so again when you heat ice, it will again form the water. So this one, it is because of the freezing, and this one, it is because of the heating. And here it is. So here is the chapati dough. So here is the chapati dough example that we had studied, and here it is the folding of paper. Folding of paper example. So these are the picture examples of the reversible changes. So I hope you have clearly understood what is reversible change. So now how do we define reversible change? Uh, any change in which original substance can be brought back is called as what? Is called as reversible change. So that one we call it as reversible change. So this is how we actually define the word or reversible change, and there are some examples which we had clearly learned. And here are again some more examples. So here there is a chocolate. So let me use some other color now. So here there is a chocolate. As you can see, there is a chocolate here. Once when you heat this chocolate, once when the chocolate is heated, it will melt. Melted chocolate. And again, if you cool this melted chocolate, it will form to it, it will take the shape of the normal container. So this is an example, one such example, and here it is. See, here it is the orange juice. So here it is orange juice. Once when you cool this, uh, again it will form the candy. So here you can see the candy. So here you can see the candy, and again once when you heat this candy, it will form a orange juice again. And here is one such example, candle wax. When it is heated, it will form a molten wax. Again, when this molten wax is cooled, it will form the candle wax. So these are the examples for the reversible change. So here if you see, the original substance is recovered. So the original substance is recovered, and this is an example for reversible change, and that is how we actually understand reversible change. So, and after understanding about reversible change, we need to understand about the chemical change. Irreversible change. So now we are studying about the irreversible change. So what is reversible change? Original substance can be recovered. A change in which original substance cannot be recovered. So here original substance is not recovered. Original substance is not recovered, and that kind of change we call it as what? That kind of change we call it as irreversible change. So now what are the examples for the irreversible change? First one, it is the ripening of a fruits. So I'm considering an example of banana here. So we all know that banana initially it will be green in color, and then it will turn out into yellow color. So this kind of process, what do we call it as? We call it as ripening. So this one we actually call it as ripening. So this ripening of fruits cannot be recovered. Again, I cannot convert yellow colored banana into green colored one. It cannot be done, and that is an example, that is the ripening of fruit. And after that, the next one, it is storing of milk. So once when the milk it's milk, once when it is damaged, or once when it is when there is a storing of milk, it cannot brought back to the pure normal drinking milk. And cooking of food, we all know that once when a raw vegetable is cooked, once when a raw vegetable is cooked, what exactly happens is that it will cooked vegetables, again we cannot convert this cooked vegetables into the raw vegetables, and that is an example for the irreversible change. And burning of paper, because burning of paper will turn out the paper into ashes. Again, ashes cannot be turned out into a paper one. So that is an example for the irreversible change. And next here we have, it is the cutting of paper. Again, cutting of paper is also a irreversible change. So how do we define irreversible change now? It is a change. So it is a change in which the original substance cannot be recovered. cannot be recovered, and that thing we call it as what? We call it as irreversible change. So I hope you all have got a clear picture of what is irreversible change. So here if you see, there are some examples, picture examples that they have given for the irreversible change. So what is that first thing? So here if you see, there are so many products that a lady is using, and she will turn out into a cake. And now, can I get back these original products from a cake? No. So that is a kind of a change. What do we call it as? Irreversible change. And best example for a reversible change is rusting of iron. So you can keep this. So rusting of iron is an example for the irreversible change. And frying of an egg, again this cannot be reversed. Burning of paper, because it will form ash and smoke. The burning of paper will form ash and smoke, so it cannot be brought back. And mixing of cement as well. So once when the cement, so best example, it is hardening of cement. So these are the example for the irreversible change. So I hope you all have got an idea. So what is irreversible change? And yeah, next kind of changes that we have to deal with, it is called as physical change and the chemical change. So till now we had learned two kinds of changes. What was those two kinds of changes? One we call it as reversible change, and second one we call it as irreversible change. Reversible change and irreversible change. So there were two kinds of changes that we had learned, but from now on we will be studying about the two different kinds of changes. The first kind of change, uh, sorry, just a moment. Yeah, the first kind of change we actually call it as physical change. First kind of change we call it as physical change, and the second kind of change, second one we call it as chemical change. So these are the two kinds of changes that we will be learning from now on. So the first kind of change, it is called as physical change. See, whenever you consider a substance, see, I'm considering a substance, there will be two kinds of properties for any of the substance. How many kinds of properties will be there? Yes, two kinds of property. First property we call it as physical property, and second one we call it as chemical property. First one we call it as physical property, and second one we call it as chemical property. A change brought about the physical properties. So if there is a change that is altered only in the physical properties, that kind of change we call it as physical change. And in the physical change, no new substances are formed. So no new substances is formed, and molecular composition of the substance remains same. So what is this? Now I'm considering ice cube. So I am considering ice cube. Once when we heat this ice cube, it will form the water. So what is the formula for water? It is H2O, and for ice cube also it is H2O. So here if you see the formula for ice cube, it is H2O, and even the formula for water, it is H2O. So this is what we call it as molecular composition. Is it same or is it different? It is actually same. So here if you see, H2O is for both ice cube and as well for the water. So it is actually same. So if it is same, that is that point, that point is justified, which is clearly stating that So molecular composition of the substance remains the same. And after that, what exactly changes in the physical change is that shape of an object changes, size of an object change, and the color of an object will also change. So these are the things that will actually change. And most of the physical, please remember this point, most of the physical changes are reversible. Most of them are reversible, where we can get back the original substance, and heat involved is actually less. So the physical change will does not take too much of heat. So what are the examples for the physical change? First one, it is melting of ice. So as I have clearly told here, ice cube is converted into water on heating. Again, water can be brought back to ice cube on freezing. So these are the things that we will have to remember about the physical change. And glowing of an electric bulb, glowing of an electric bulb is also an example for the physical changes. So here it is, they have given some of the examples for the physical changes. Boiling of water is an example for physical change. Drying of clothes is an example for physical change. Melting of ice cream is an example for physical change. Cutting of fruits, glowing of bulb, beating of metal. So all these things are the example for the physical change. So before getting into the physical change, so now you tell me what properties are changed in the physical change. It alters only physical properties. It alters only physical properties of a substance. And what remains the same? The molecular composition. The molecular composition of the substance remains same. But what exactly changes? Shape, size, and color.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಆಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ವೆನ್ ತಗೋತಾರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅದು
What exactly happens in a physical change? It will generally alter only the physical properties, and the molecular composition remains the same. Shape, size, and color of the object changes. But what exactly happens is that the major thing here it is the original substance is reversible. So most of the physical change is reversible. Most of the physical changes reversible. So here is the here it is about the physical change. And after this, the next one that we have, it is the chemical change. So after studying about physical change, we have to study about the chemical change. So as I have clearly mentioned, any substance will be having two properties. One we call it as physical properties, and second one we are calling it as chemical property. So if physical property is only altered, we call it as a physical change. But here in the chemical change, the chemical properties is also altered. So please remember that in a chemical change, chemical properties is altered, whereas in the physical change, physical properties is altered. So there will be two properties, physical and chemical properties. But here what exactly happens is that the molecular composition of the substance changes, whereas the molecular composition of a substance remains the same in the physical change, whereas in the chemical change it will change. So in the physical change less heat was absorbed, whereas in the chemical change there is more heat absorbed. And please remember this, most of the chemical changes are permanent and irreversible. So this is about the chemical change. What are the examples for the chemical change? Digestion of food and ripening of food, fruit, all these things are the example for the chemical change. So here is a picture example for a chemical changes. First one, it is burning of coal, burning of candle, rusting of metal, explosion of firecracker, decomposition of organic matter, ripening of fruits. So all these are the examples for the chemical change. So here when I want to summarize everything under chemical change, what is that first point here? Chemical properties of the substance. Chemical properties of the substance chemical properties of the substance is altered. And here what changes? Molecular composition also changes. The molecular composition also changes, and chemical changes are generally permanent and irreversible. So these are the main characteristics of the chemical change, and in the below they have given the examples for the chemical change. So after this thing, we have to study the differences between the physical and the chemical change. The same characteristics which we had studied, we will be differentiating here. So first point, change is temporary, or it can be reversed back to its original substance, and that is the reason change is temporary in the physical change, whereas change is permanent in the chemical change. So this is the first differences between the physical and the chemical change. And in physical change, no new substance is formed, whereas in the chemical change, new substances are formed. And changes can be reversed. Here changes cannot be reversed by simple physical method. So this is the third difference. Next point, energy may or may not be released or absorbed, but energy is released or absorbed during the chemical change. And most of the time original form of the substance is brought back by simple physical method, but the original substance cannot be brought back as it is permanent, that we have clearly studied here. So it cannot be brought back by the simple physical method. So these are the differences between the chemical change. And after studying about the two kinds of changes, so when I say changes, there will be two classification. One, we call it as a reversible change, and second one we call it as irreversible change. And we had studied another set which we call it as physical change. And physical so after physical change, the second one that we had studied, it was about the chemical change. So let me write it here. After physical change that we wrote, it was the chemical change. So physical change and chemical change, and the next one it is reversible change and the irreversible change. And after this we have a new concepts to learn, that is expansion and contraction. So when the temperature increases, so when the temperature is increasing, the particle of a substance big, become loose, they become loose, or the particle of a substance expand, and this thing we call it as expansion. So when the temperature is increasing, the particle of a substance is expanding or it becomes loose, and that process we call it as expansion. And when the temperature decreases, the particle of a substance contracts or it becomes tight, and that we call it as what? Contraction. So here temperature increases, the particles expand, that process we call it as expansion. But here what is happening? The temperature decreases and it contracts, the particles of a substance contract, and the process we call it as what? Contraction. So the amount of expansion or contraction varies, so it is not same in solid, liquid and gas, and it keeps on varying with respect to the state of a matter. So there are physical changes that take place when a substance or material moves from one state of matter to the another. So there are some physical changes that will definitely happen. So here I'm saying ice cube, this will be converted into water, and the water will be converted into vapor. So here it is in a solid state, here it is in a liquid state, here it is in a gaseous state. So let me write that: solid state to liquid state to gaseous state. So there is a change in the physical, there are some physical changes, and water is a classic example. How? Because it can exist as an ice cube, because it is in the solid state, it can exist as a water in the liquid state, and it can exist as a vapor in the gaseous state. And after this, so here if you see the same thing that they have given here, so let me take this one clear example. So here say I'm considering water, the best example that I am considering, it is water. So here if you just check, water can exist in the solid state as an ice cube, and in the liquid state it is called as water, and in the gaseous state it is called as vapor. So If a solid is converted into liquid, we call it as fusion. If a solid is converted into liquid, we call it as fusion. And if a liquid is converted into gas, the conversion of liquid state to gaseous state, we call it as vaporization. So I hope it is clear now. And from the gas to solid conversion, we call it as sublimation. And solid to gas, again we call it as sublimation. And gas to liquid, we call it as condensation, because there is some sort of condensation. And from liquid to solid, we call it as solidification. So these are the names for the interconversion of states of matter. So this is an interconversion on the states of matter. So this ends the third chapter, that is changes around us. So in the next session, we will take up the question and answer of this same chapter. And yes, thank you all for attending. Thank you so much.